Okay, so tonight your homework is Module 1, Problem Set 13. This will be due in your Google Classroom tomorrow. Your next quiz is coming up on October 11th. Today's lesson is Lesson 13 from Ratio Tables to Equation using the value of a ratio. So example 1 says George is mixing a special shade of orange paint. He mixed 1 gallon of red paint with 3 gallons of yellow paint. Based on the information on red and yellow paint, complete the table below. So if we read back up into the problem, we see it's 1 gallon of red paint, 3 gallons of yellow paint. So looking at the table, we can see under red paint, we would put 1, since under yellow paint, we have 3. Now the connection here is that to get from red paint to yellow paint, we took the 1 and multiplied it by 3. And you can see that right here under the relationship. This 3 for yellow paint is equal to the 1 red times 3. Total is something that we will look at, and that is just how many gallons altogether of paint do we have, including the red and yellow. So if we take how many gallons of red paint we have, add it to the number of yellow gallons of paint, that means we have a total of 4 gallons of paint, since 1 plus 3 is 4. Okay, so looking at the next section, we have 2 gallons of red paint. So just as we know in a ratio table, we should be multiplying all of the numbers in the red paint column by the same number to get the numbers in the yellow paint column. I would do 2 times 3 to get 6 yellow. So the relationship there is we get our 6 from doing 2 gallons of red times 3. Altogether then, we would have 2 plus 6 and get 8. With the next one, we have yellow paint at 9. We can even look at the relationship to see what should be going in the red paint column, which is just this first number here, or 3. You can also tell, going down the red paint column, we're just counting by ones. If we look at the total paint column for this row right here, 3 plus the 9 yellow would give us 12 gallons. And if you can kind of notice, going down the total paint column, we're counting by 4s. So next we would have our 4. 4 times 3 gives us the 12 that we see here. In other words, the relationship is I got my 12 gallons of paint from taking the 4 gallons of red and multiplying it by 3. Total altogether, I have 4 red plus 12 yellow, or 16. And again, just counting by 4s down the total paint column. Okay, so for the last one, we have 5 gallons of red times 3 to get 15 yellow. Down the yellow column, you can see we're counting by 3s. Our relationship, we got our 15 gallons of yellow paint from taking 5 red and multiplying it by 3. For our total paint, 5 plus 15 gives us 20 total gallons. Again, counting by 4s down the total column. So now, this should not be much new to you. We've already done ratio tables based on a ratio. What we're going to do next, though, is we're going to see how we can write some equations based off of the ratio table. So the next set of directions says, using the variables R for red and Y for yellow, write 2 equations to show the relationship between red paint R and yellow paint Y. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically show what we just did. So first, if we took our red paint, we had the amount of red paint, we multiplied it by 3 to get the yellow paint. Instead of using the words red and yellow, they're asking us to use the variables, or letters that represent a number or a word in this case. The red is represented by the letter R. We're multiplying by 3. When we start using variables, which we'll see later on in the year, and we're just going to get a quick little introduction to it here, if we're multiplying a variable by a number, the way that you write this is you put the number first and you put it directly next to the variable. So I'm going to actually use a lowercase letter just because you typically see variables written as lowercase letters. So it's going to look like this, 3r. That reads as 3 times r. That's going to be something very important when we're working with equations, to know that when a number and a letter are right next to each other, they're being multiplied together. So now I'm just going to write equals y for the yellow. So I've taken my 3, I've multiplied it by the red to get the yellow. So anytime I'm going from red paint to yellow paint in the table, I've multiplied by 3, as we can see down here. There is the way to go backwards as well. What happens if we knew the number of yellow paint and we were trying to find the amount of red? So if going this way we're multiplying by yellow, you can kind of see going backwards, it would be the opposite or the inverse operation of multiplying by 3, which is division. So we'd be dividing by 3. So if you notice, 15 divided by 3 is 5, 12 divided by 3 is 4, 9 divided by 3 is 3, 6 divided by 3 is 2, and 3 divided by 3 is 1. So in other words, we're taking the amount of yellow paint, dividing it by 3 to get the amount of red paint. Just like we did in the previous problem, we're going to use variables instead of words. So yellow is just y. We can use the division symbol here to write it like this. But the way that you're going to see it a lot in algebra is as a fraction. So you would see this as y divided by 3 equals r. Remember we said that any fraction is actually a division problem. So you could see it like this, but more than likely when we get to algebra and now, we're going to write it as the fraction y divided by 3. Don't forget, in the computer that's going to look just a little different. It would be y / 3 equals r. Okay, so 2 separate equations we can pull from this table. One is our multiplication equation going from red to yellow, and one is a division equation going from yellow back to red. So now what it's asking us to do is to write an equation comparing the amount of red paint and the total paint. So if we look at our red column and we look at our total column, we have to think, what are we doing to the numbers in the red paint column in order to get the numbers in the yellow or the total paint column? So what did I do to the 1 to make it a 4? What did I do to the 2 to make it an 8? What did I do to the 3 to make it a 12? And so on. Hopefully you can all see that you're multiplying by 4. So to get from red to total, we've multiplied by 4. Now going backwards, that means we're doing the inverse or opposite operation with the same number. So to get from total paint back to red paint, I would be dividing by 4. It doesn't ask us to write 2 equations, but we will. So the first equation is our multiplication equation. So we took our red, we multiplied it by 4, and we got our total. Again, when we write our multiplication equation, we're going to put our number first, so 4, followed by the variable, r for red, and that's going to equal t for total. If we want to write it as a division equation, we took the total amount, we divided it by 4, and we got the red. I should have left you guys 2 lines on here to write this. So t for total, divided by 4, and notice I'm writing that as the fraction, and that's going to equal the red. Okay? So this is just basically a way to figure out how much yellow paint we have if we're given red, how much red paint we have if we're given yellow, and so on. Okay, example 2. This one says Jorge now plans to mix red paint and blue paint to create purple paint. The color of purple he has decided to make combines red paint and blue paint in the ratio 4:1. If Jorge can only purchase paint in 1-gallon containers, construct a ratio table for all possible combinations for red and blue paint that will give Jorge no more than 25 gallons of purple paint. So something we have to be careful of here is that we're combining red and blue. So the 4 would be the red and the 1 would be the blue. If you look at the table, it's the opposite of that. So we want to just be careful to make sure that we're putting the numbers in the correct order. So that would mean for 4 red, there's 1 blue. So now what we're going to do is look at the relationship between this. So to get from blue to red, I multiplied by 4. So I can say 1 times 4 is equal to 4. For the total paint, that means 1 gallon of blue plus 4 gallons of red would be a total of 5 gallons of paint. So now we're going to continue on. They want us to get no more than 25 gallons of purple paint. Since we're starting here with 5, that means we're going to be counting by 5 down here, seeing that the ratio at this point is in simplest form. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So that gets us those no more than 25 gallons of paint. What it also means is that we can figure out the rest of the table based on that information. So for example, to go from blue to total, I multiplied by 5. So if you think about it, if I know how much total paint I have to do the opposite of multiply by 5, which would be divide by 5. So 10 divided by 5 would give me 2. 15 divided by 5 would give me 3. And as you can see, we're just counting by ones down the blue column. Then we can continue on to figure out our red column. 2 times 4, because we're multiplying by 4 to get from blue to red, is 8. So 2 times 4 equals that 8. From 3, we're multiplying by 4 to get 12. So 3 times 4 equals 12 is the relationship. 4 times 4 is 16. So 4 times 4 equals 16 is the relationship. And then 5 times 4 to get 20. If you want to check your totals, 2 plus 8 is 10. 3 plus 12 is 15. 4 plus 16 is 20. 5 plus 20 is 25. So it does in fact work out. So now, if we're going to write 2 equations, we can look and see what we did. So to get from blue to red, which is what it's asking us to write first, the relationship between blue and red paint, from blue to red, I multiply by 4, which means if I'm going to go from red to blue, I'll do the opposite or inverse operation, which is to be division by 4. So in other words, I took the blue paint, multiplied it by 4, and that gave me the red paint. Again, I want to write this in algebraic form, which means if I'm multiplying, the number goes first, directly attached to the variable. So 4 times blue, or 4b, would be equal to the variable for red, or r. The division equation is going to be to go from red to blue. So from red, I divide by 4 to get my blue. So what this would look like is R divided by 4 equals B. Again, make sure that you're using that fraction to show your division. Now they want us to compare blue to total, which we've already drawn our arrows to show what we're doing. So blue times 5 gave us the total. Again, to write that as an equation, we would put the 5 first, directly next to the B for blue, and that's equal to T for total. If we want to see the division, we're taking the total amount, and this time we're going backwards, so we're doing the opposite, which would be divide by 5 to get the blue. So what that would look like algebraically is T for total divided by 5, and again using that fraction, equal to blue, or B for blue. Okay, so hopefully you were able to see how you can go from a ratio table to an equation for the relationship between the items in the table. You now have some practice problems that you can work on, so you may go ahead and get started on those.